know one thing, it's not just about the airplane and getting on there. Airports are a big part of this. And there's been a lot of talk about infrastructure in the transportation world. We hear it about roads and bridges. If you live in New York and DC, you hear it about your subway systems. But I don't know that we always hear a lot about airports and infrastructure and the state of infrastructure at airports. And I think Kevin might have something to say about that.
Well, Lori, first of all, thank you for having me here. Second of all, yes, I have lots to say about airports. Infrastructure is probably our most important issue. We have airports on average, the terminals are 40 years old. We have about 840 million people going through U.S. airports last year. Those airports were designed for about half that amount of traffic. So what we need to do in the U.S. airports is make them 21st century airports to enhance the customer experience. Really, it's all about the customers, about customer service. It's being able to move the customer from the time they enter the airport, when they go through TSA, to go to the terminal to buy lunch, to buy a shirt, buy a tie, whatever they want to buy, get onto one of Sean's aircraft and get to where they need to go. The infrastructure we have today doesn't enhance that experience. Airports need to modernize, and some are further ahead than others, but our goal is to make certain that the transportation system, our sector, is modernized 21st century. That means both the airlines and the airports have to be modernized to make certain that the customer has a fabulous experience, both going through security, making sure there's enough TSA officers to be able to handle that. The technology exists to be able to handle that part of it, both in the front of the airport with TSA and inbound international with Customs and Border Protection. And then while they're at our airports, that they have a great customer experience, so when they get on their planes to go to where they're going, they're not stressed and they feel really good about being where they are. Long lines do not help airports. 2 years ago, when we had those long lines, social media lit up and with pictures of long lines, and it wasn't about the great service when they got past the line, it was about the lines themselves, which we had nothing to do with. And we worked together with the airlines to help solve that problem, but more needs to be done.
We think, agree with a lot of what you said, but the part that is left out by the airport lobby is we need not just fancier airports, we need more airports. The United States is the only first world country in the world, and probably even second and third world country, that has built 0 new airports for decades. And we are favoring repeal of some of the laws and regulations that prohibit, for instance, private airports, that prohibit the United States government from operating an airport. So what we have now, and the #1 complaint of passengers traditionally, is delay. Congestion delays is a major part of that. And 60% of the congestion delays are from one place, New York City. Has 3 airports, all controlled by the Port Authority, which is a monopoly. We need a 4th airport there. Now, the locals don't want a 4th airport. The Port Authority likes their monopoly. They don't want a 4th airport. Chicago, 2 airports owned by the city of Chicago, major cash cow. They have lobbied against a 3rd airport for decades successfully. We need to build more airports. The amount that's being talked about of $12 billion for improving airports is a drop in the bucket. So we favor, at the very least, a 4th airport for New York, a 3rd airport of Chicago, and probably another one for Atlanta.
Can I jump in here on this? I agree with what you're saying here, but I think we need to we have to start with modernizing the ones we have now. And then if in fact the local communities decide that they need another airport, whether it be JFK, whether New York or Atlanta or LA or San Francisco, then we go to the next level. But immediately, and we know how long that takes to do. It's not like when we go to China and the Chinese rules are a little bit different, they can build an airport pretty quickly. In the United States, there are regulations, and of course we are supportive of ridding the airport business of unnecessary regulations. We let the Trump administration know that. But in terms of your answer there, yes, we'd like to have new airports, but I do think we need to take those airports we have today, modernize them, make sure that the passenger experience is first rate, and then if we can build new airports, let's do it.
Problem is, we'll all be gone by the time that happens.
Sean, do you have any thoughts on this?
No, I mean, it's Kevin's right. I'm not sure about the 12 billion. I mean, in general, if you look at the top 30 airports and the number, and Kevin knows these numbers better than I, but it's about $300 billion of development is underway right now, or has just been completed. Airlines are a big part of that. We work well with the airports on that. They're sort of our landlords in a sense. But it's a good relationship because obviously we need that infrastructure. We need that infrastructure. Airports and airlines, it's a completely symbiotic relationship. We need a place to land. The notion of creating more airports isn't something that a lot of communities are saying to us right now. It's more, how do we make sure that there are adequate gates? How do we make sure, another big issue that hasn't been touched on is just what the infrastructure in the sky. Air traffic control reform, we're still using 1950s era radar technology, which is very safe but very inefficient. We're one of the only modernized countries that's still using that backward technology. We can do a lot better.
Airports have $100 billion of needs in the next 5 years. That's up 35% from 2 years ago when we surveyed our members. That's $100 billion, $20 billion a year. Of that $20 billion, $10 billion of that is handled by certain funding through certain government programs, but we're $10 billion short. So we have to focus on making airports modern by being able to change the funding structure to allow airports to make decisions that are best for local communities. Not what the FAA tells us to do, but for local communities. That's when, in fact, airports will begin to grow, and we get the funding, working with Senator Blunt and Senator Cantwell and others in the Senate and the House to be able to make that happen.
So